The Erie County budget is wild. It's totally different than the city. The city of Erie, we just did a video on that. It's pretty straightforward. 80% of all of the kind of outflows are already mandatory spending. So it's public safety and it's pensions, you're at 80%. There's not a lot of wiggle room. The county budget is the same, it's just more massive. The revenues come in from a lot of different sources than the city has. And when they talk about the county executive being an administrator, you really see it, right? They really have to administrate this giant this giant entity with a lot of different funding. So you're really managing the money along with kind of just the overall county government. So let's get into this. I think that this is interesting. I'm trying not to make this boring at all, but there's a lot of really cool things I think that really surprised me. So just start. The budget is about $552 million, right? And let's talk about how that revenue comes in. This surprised the heck out of me. I thought that taxes and property taxes were a huge amount of how the county funds. It's a relatively small amount. 54% come in through federal, state, and municipal grants, almost $300 million, right? And so these are earmarked for specific mandates like child welfare, behavioral health, aging services, right? A lot of rigorous guidelines, reporting. A lot of times there's a county match that has to happen. Next is not taxes either, right? The next funding source is charges for services, right? So user fees, courthouse filings, permits, about $111 million, $112 million. Then we have our property taxes, which is about 19% of the county budget from a revenue standpoint. About a little over $100 million, and then it drops off pretty significantly. Transfers from other funds, right? Looking at kind of moving your savings to a checking account, and then we have our hotel room tax, and then it kind of drops off. So those half of this thing is grants, right? And I think the other interesting thing is that 73% of revenue derives from non-local sources. So we're very committed to intergovernmental support. It kind of limits our flexibility, but it also mitigates a huge burden on taxpayers. So I think that kind of makes sense. We talked about property taxes as well, and if you follow politics in Erie, how there was a little bit of a kind of a dust up with council in Brent Davis over the amount of raising of mills or not. The county council ended up overriding a veto. So for 2026, we went up 0.33 mils from 6.61 to 6.94 mils. So that's about $33 more for $100,000 assessed property. Okay, we know how kind of the money comes in, and this is where things get, I don't want to say squirrely, but it gets kind of a little bit more interesting on how they actually go out, right? And the funding of that. Everybody thinks, kind of like the city of Erie, we kind of have a general fund and everything kind of comes out of that. Well, that's not even close to what happens kind of here. So here's the categories. So not kind of where the money's coming from, but this is the categories that get funded, right? So on the county budget, on the line, it says other services. Well, no, what is other services? That is 48% of our expenditures. Well, those are all the third parties that the county contracts with to provide services, right? So, the Barber Institute, Erie County Care Management, Stairways, all of those, the Achievement Center, they get county funding to then go provide services. That's again, $265 million of that goes to those guys. And again, that could be those could be grants. Those could be from the general fund, right? So this is kind of taking all of that and just saying, hey, where do all of this money, where does it go? Next, 23% is just wages and fringe benefits, right? So correction officers, caseworkers, anybody who's working in the county, they got to get paid. And then we start to get to the interesting stuff, which is, grant expenses. So 19.22% or about $105 million is pass-through funding to community organizations and individuals for program delivery, right? So, giving that money to other nonprofits that kind of hand out that money. So this could be everything from GCAC. This could be, any type of nonprofit. I think EMTA, right? All of that money kind of goes through here as a pass through, right? And then we have transfer to other funds, right? So the transfer to other funds is basically taking that money, whether it be the grants, whether it be taxes, all of that money, and then giving it to the kind of the arm of the county that's going to go spend it, right? Child services, the library fund, public safety fund for 911, for emergency dispatch, right? So all of that then goes to their bucket and then they go spend it, right? So that's kind of how when you see transfer other funds, that's them allocating the money to different arms of the county that also provide services. And then again, I'm not going to get into the kind of capital overlay 1.6%, about 8 million. That's just equipment and all that. So one of the things that kind of I just questioned and you thought like where's the general fund? Where does the general fund kind of come into this play? And again, everything that I talked to you about, right? Monies could be coming from anywhere. Again, they could come from grants, they could be coming from the general fund, right? All of that, those are kind of how, from an accounting standpoint, from the county, how things have to be kind of shown, right? So when we get to kind of the general fund, right? The general fund for the county is 137, 138 million. That's our primary operating account, right? It's funded mostly by property taxes and supports kind of the essential functions. There's limited discretion, kind of really how you can do. So the four main entities that get money directly from our general fund are again our corrections, about 37 million, right? The Erie County Prison, probation, and then courts and related offices, 23%. And then we get to our administrative support. And again, all of this is not double accounting. I hope I'm making that clear, right? So all of the, kind of all those things that we pay, right? The other services that it's going to the third parties, the wages, the grant expenses, right? All of those could be coming from lots of different sources. That's what is being paid. And kind of this is now specifically what is being paid out of the general fund, right? So it kind of, it takes the whole 552 million and then kind of breaks it down to, what is being paid. And now we're kind of have our general fund and then what is being paid of that. Hope that makes sense because it took me a little bit to kind of wrap that around my head. So again, we have corrections, courts and related offices. You have general government, and then we have our transfers out. Right. So transfers out of the general fund are what the general fund is supporting from kind of that overall. Right. So again, 15 million going to child services, 6 million going to the library. Public safety is getting 3 million from the general fund. All right. So we can kind of see where the general fund is. Again, this is the money that we collected with property taxes mostly. And then that's the outflow of it from the actual general fund. And then I think that this is interesting too, is again, we have grants then, right? So I think this is kind of where you have most of the vetoes, right? When we have grants to community organizations. So out of the general fund for 2026, EMTA had 500,000, right? GCAC is on here for almost 700 grand, the Penn State Cooperative Extension. And you can kind of see kind of the grants that were given then from the general fund. So that's basically our property taxes then being paid out for this. The other thing to kind of highlight is outside of our general fund, $4 million from the gaming fund supports the Erie County Community College. So that was also given to the county from gaming funds, and then we gave it to the community college. So essentially, about 98% of the general fund is committed to mandates and overhead, right? So there's only a very small percentage that you're looking at here, right, that can actually go to community initiatives. And again, it's 1.7, about 2% of that budget. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So again, highlights are, most of our revenue is coming in from grants. Grants are massively important. I think that's why AI could be really, really helpful. Actually, not to go off on a tangent to the grant writing process. Taxes, right, are a relatively small amount of what comes in. Here's some other highlights that I got that I think you're going to find really interesting. So, American Recovery Act funds, we got 52.4 million of them in 2020, 2021-ish, 2022. They're fully allocated. There's about 15 to 20 million unspent as of mid 2025, but they have been allocated. There's only 140 grand that's been transferred in 2026, and everything that I could find from the budget is we're done with those. We have a huge EMS, and you've heard some of that kind of infighting back and forth from the Davis administration to county council. EMS funding drops from 2.5 million in 2025 to 410,000. Now there was some one-time surge that was going to EMS that it included 100 scholarships for EMT and paramedic training, some wage reimbursements, all of the stuff that kind of happened. Now we're kind of back down to kind of level setting that at that 410,000. Services I don't think are going to be dropped or should be lower, but that's where that is. Again, we have a very low debt burden, right? 0.06% of debt service. It's very minimal. They've done a really good job with that. All right, let's talk about reserves in the rainy day fund, because I think that this is huge. Nobody really talks about it, and I'm not sure if my numbers are right. So if I'm wrong here, please call me out. I'm totally cool, but I have researched this, and again, the full financial plan or the full all of the financial details, right, are not out for 2025 yet, right? So looking at probably halfway through this year, we'll have all of the financials for 2025. But looking at 2024, right, there was an unassigned general fund balance of 52 million, $51.6 million. Brenton Davis has said that there is $51 million. I've heard other things like 23, 24 million. I'm not sure what that number is. Everything that we've been able to look for, though, is right around that $50 million. So if we do have a $50 million rainy day surplus fund, then there's some questions that I think need to be asked with that. I could be totally wrong with that. I hope somebody corrects me on that. That's the only number I really couldn't find in any of the details we have yet until all the financials come out later this year. But there's questions to be asked if our rainy day fund is that large, and it seems like it is because it's been that way for multiple years in that 40 to 50 million dollar range, and from all the research that I've done. So again, I'm seeing 44.5 million in 2019. So I don't know. Love to know that number, but I think there are questions to be asked if that number is that high. And then I just thought it was interesting to just here to talk about the difference, right? The Erie County has a $552 million budget. The City of Erie's is 110 million, right? Again, I think the county relies just massively on grants, right? They do support different things, but number one, if there is that big of a surplus, and there are some things that seem like they overlap, I'd love to, and we'll probably talk about these in some other videos kind of moving forward, how the county can support the city a little bit more. I know that can get a little bit divisive, but I think, at this point, if the city really struggles, the county's going to really struggle as well. So I hope that gives a little bit of a insight into how the budget works. It was kind of eye-opening for me to kind of see what gets funded. And again, most of this is for services for citizens that maybe need some help, right? I love that. That's kind of the main gist of this. It'll be very interesting to see next year's budget and how there could be changes with the new administration coming in, but really interesting stuff. I hope you guys enjoy it. Love to hear any thoughts that you have.